The orbital perch was the quietest place in the galaxy. At least, it was for Admiral Take. He sat in his usual booth, a curved seat of dark material that seemed to swallow the soft light of the dining platform. Before him, the wide window showed the endless swirl of a gas giant, bands of orange and cream moving in a slow, silent dance. Stars hung like sharp, cold diamonds in the blackness. Other patrons, a variety of species from across the Empire, made gentle sounds as they ate and talked. The clink of a glass, the murmur of conversation, the low hum of the station itself. Admiral Take heard none of it. 10 years ago, during the Battle of the Cerulean Vale, a power core on his flagship had ruptured. He had stayed on the bridge, directing the evacuation as the shockwave came. It saved his crew. It also shattered the delicate inner structures of his ears, the organs that processed not just sound, but the vital subsonic rumbles his people used to speak complex thoughts. The silence that followed was total and absolute. Now, he navigated the world through text on a small screen attached to his wrist, and through the vibrations he could feel through his feet or his hands when he touched a surface. He was a hero, but he was also a relic. A dragon who could not hear the songs of his own kind. A young server from a bird-like species, his feathers neat and dark, approached the table. His name was June. He moved with a graceful silence that Take appreciated. June bowed his head and offered a thin crystal tablet, the menu. Take gave a single, slow nod. He took the tablet and scanned the flowing script. His wrist calm, a band of dark metal, lit up. With a careful claw tip, he tapped a selection. The clear broth, the steamed mineral fish, a glass of ice water. He turned the tablet around so June could see the order displayed on his wrist screen. At once, Admiral, June said, his beak moving. Take saw the words form, understood their meaning from long practice of reading lips, and nodded again. June glided away. Take's eyes returned to the view. His mind, however, was not on the stars. It was on the quiet. In the silence, his own thoughts were too loud. Memories of engine roars and battle chants he could no longer hear. The respectful but distant pity in the eyes of his fellow dragons, especially the young ones like Captain Kale. Take's jaw tightened slightly, causing the scales along his neck to shift with a faint, dry rustle he could feel in his own throat. The restaurant was designed for beings of status. The tables were spaced far apart. The lighting was low and focused on the individual diners, creating islands of privacy in the vast room. This suited Take. It meant fewer people tried to talk to him. They would see the great, retired admiral, his scales the color of aged bronze, the battle scars visible like silver threads across his brow and forearms, and they would leave him to his silence. It was easier for them. It was lonelier for him. He saw movement at the entrance. A human female, dressed in the simple gray tunic of the serving staff, entered the main floor. She was holding something close to her chest in a fabric sling. A small, rounded bundle. A child. A baby. Take's first feeling was a flicker of annoyance. This was not a place for human young. They were noisy, unpredictable. Their sounds were sharp and meaningless. He watched as June intercepted her near the service station. Take could not hear the conversation, but he saw the body language. The human, whose name tag read Sumin, bowed her head deeply, her shoulders tense. She gestured to the baby, her expression one of clear apology. June's feathers ruffled slightly, a sign of mild displeasure, but he looked around the quiet dining room and then gave a slow, reluctant nod. He pointed towards a secondary service corridor, apparently instructing her to use that route. Sumin bowed again, her relief visible even from a distance. She adjusted the sling carefully and began her work, moving with an effort at quietness that was almost painful to watch. Take dismissed her from his thoughts. A minor disruption, nothing more. His broth arrived. It was brought not by June, but by Sumin herself. She placed the bowl before him with extreme care, her movements slow and clear. She made sure the handle of the spoon was turned exactly towards his right hand. She did not speak. She simply completed the task, her eyes glancing from the bowl to his face once, checking for any sign of disapproval. Seeing none, she gave a tiny bow and retreated. The broth was perfect. Steam rose from it in a faint, fragrant cloud. Take dipped his spoon and ate. The flavor was rich and clean, but he tasted it in a vacuum of sound. He could not hear the soft slurp as he lifted the spoon. He could not hear the gentle tap as he set it back in the bowl. His world was a painting, beautiful and still, and he was trapped inside it, alone at his table, watching the silent, colorful swirl of the giant planet below, waiting for the next course, and the next until the meal, like the day, would be over. Sumin's heart was beating a fast rhythm against her ribs, a feeling she was sure the baby, Ji-ho, could feel where he slept against her chest. The orbital perch was not a place for people like her. The floors were a deep, polished stone that reflected the soft ceiling lights like still water. The air smelled of rare spices and clean metal. Every customer looked like they came from a different world, which they did, and they all looked important. Her supervisor had been clear. Do not speak unless asked a direct question. Be precise. Be invisible. That was hard to do with an 8-month-old bundled against you. Her childcare for the evening had fallen through at the last moment. Calling in sick was not an option. The rent for their tiny module in the lower decks did not wait. So she had made a choice, hoping Ji-ho would sleep through her shift. She moved along the service corridor, her soft shoes making no sound. She peeked into the main dining room through a service gap in the wall. Her eyes found the Dragon Admiral immediately. He was like a statue carved from old dark copper, sitting with his back to the curved viewing window. The planet's light painted his scaled shoulders in colors of fire and rust. He was immense, and everything about him spoke of quiet power and deep silence. June, the maitre d', appeared beside her so suddenly she almost gasped. He looked from her face to the sleeping baby and back again. His dark, intelligent eyes showed concern, not anger. That is Admiral Take, June said, his voice a low, clicking whisper. He is a hero of the Empire. He is also profoundly deaf. He communicates through the device on his wrist. You must be even more careful. Place things where he can see them. Do not expect a verbal response. Do not startle him. The baby must be silent. Sumin nodded, swallowing hard. He is a good sleeper. He will be quiet. I promise. June's feathers shifted slightly. See that he is. Your station is the West Quadrant. Start with Table 7. The Glesians there only need water refills. Taking a deep breath, Sumin stepped onto the main floor. The weight of the room pressed on her. She felt every eye, though no one was actually looking at her. To them, she was part of the furniture. She went to the Glesian table, for tall beings with skin like polished blue stone. She filled their water glasses with a steady hand. The only sign of her nerves a slight tremor in the moisture on the pitcher's side. Throughout it all, she was aware of the Admiral. He was an island of absolute stillness. While other patrons shifted or nodded or made small gestures as they talked, he did none of those things. He simply was. He ate his broth with a slow, measured pace, his eyes often on the view. She saw the young server bring his next course, a plate of steamed fish that gleamed like pearl. The Admiral acknowledged it with the barest tilt of his head. Her next task was to clear a dessert plate from a table closer to him. As she leaned in to gather the empty dish, Ji-ho stirred in his sling. He made a soft, sleepy sigh. It was a tiny sound, but to Sumin it was as loud as an alarm. She froze, her eyes darting to the Admiral. He had heard nothing. His gaze remained fixed on the stars. The relief was so strong it made her legs feel weak for a second. She finished her task and retreated back to the safety of the service corridor, leaning against the cool wall for a moment. Ji-ho blinked his dark eyes open, looking up at her with a sleepy, confused expression. "Shoo, my little man," she whispered, her lips touching his soft hair. "Just a little longer. Be quiet for Mama." He gurgled softly, a bubble of spit forming on his lips. She wiped it away with the corner of her sleeve, a smile touching her lips despite her fear. He was her anchor in this terrifying, beautiful place. He was the reason she was here, working this job, trying to build a life in a station that saw humans as simple, recent additions to the Empire, better suited for manual labor and service than for anything important. She checked the order screen. The Admiral's main course was finished. It was time to clear his plate. This would be the closest she had been to him. She took another deep breath, smoothed her tunic, and walked back into the quiet room. She approached his table from the side, moving slowly into his line of sight. He turned his head slightly, his slitted eyes taking her in. There was no warmth in them, but no hostility either. Just observation. She focused on her job. She reached for the empty plate, her movements careful and clean. She did not clatter the porcelain. As she lifted it, she gave a small, polite bow of her head, a universal sign of respect and completed service as she straightened. Ji-ho, now more awake and curious, turned his head. His eyes, wide and dark, found the Admiral. The ancient, scaled face, so strange and stern, seemed to fascinate him. He stared, unblinking. Sumin's blood went cold. She began to pull away, to retreat. But in that moment, Ji-ho's face broke into a pure, gummy smile. A simple, happy baby smile directed right at the giant dragon warrior. Sumin quickly turned, hiding Ji-ho from view, and walked away as calmly as she could. She did not see the Admiral's eyes follow her for just a second longer than before, a faint, unreadable expression passing over his stone-like features before he turned back to the silent stars. A new energy entered the orbital perch. It came from the entrance archway, carried by 4 young Draconis officers in crisp gray and blue uniforms. They moved with a confident swagger, their tails swaying lightly behind them, their scales shining under the lights. At their head was Captain Kale. He was broad-shouldered, his scales a bright, coppery red, a stark contrast to Admiral Take's weathered bronze. Kale's eyes scanned the room, missing nothing. They landed on the solitary figure in the booth by the window. A complicated look passed over Kale's face. There was respect there, but it was buried under layers of other things. Impatience, ambition, and a sharp pity. Admiral Take had been his commander, his mentor, but that was before the cerulean veil. Now Kale saw a broken instrument, a great weapon silenced. To Kale and the new generation, a dragon who could not hear the deep song, who could not feel the tactical rumble of a fleet formation, was operating with half a mind. June moved to greet them, his professional smile in place. "Captain Kale, your table is ready." Kale didn't answer June directly. His eyes were still on Take. "In a moment," he said, his voice carrying easily across the quiet room. He began walking towards the Admiral's booth. His junior officers followed, then hung back a few steps, forming a loose half-circle. Sumin, who was filling a water pitcher at a service station, saw the approach. She felt a sudden tension in the air. The easy quiet of the room tightened. She froze, watching. Admiral Take saw the movement in the reflection of the window. He recognized the stride, the posture. He did not turn. He kept his eyes on the gas giant, his face a calm mask. He took a slow sip of his ice water. Captain Kale stopped at the edge of the booth. "Admiral," he said, his voice deliberately loud and clear. He leaned in slightly, aiming his words towards the side of Take's head where his auditory receptors were, now just decorative ridges of scarred scale. "It is good to see you honoring the old rituals. A quiet meal, a view of the void." Take finished his sip. He placed the glass down without a sound. Only then did he turn his head. His eyes, ancient and yellow gold, met Kale's bright ones. He offered no smile, no nod of greeting. He simply waited. Kale faltered for a second under that flat gaze. He tried again, speaking even more slowly, as if to a child. "We are celebrating a successful navigation drill. The new cadets learn so fast. They use the full spectrum, the subsonic coordination arrays." He emphasized the word, watching Take's face for any reaction, any sign of pain or loss. There was none. Take's expression did not change. He lifted his left arm, the one with the wrist comm. With a claw, he tapped the screen a few times. A line of text glowed brightly in the dim booth light. He turned his wrist so Kale and his group could read it. The words were simple: "Dining. Alone." A flush of darker red spread under Kale's copper scales. One of the junior officers stifled a sound. The dismissal was total and it was silent. It was also public. Kale straightened up, his pride wounded. The respectful pity in his eyes burned away, leaving only embarrassment and a spark of anger. He leaned in again. But this time his voice was lower, meant only for Take, though the movement of his lips was clear to anyone watching. "As you wish, sir," he said. The word sir was sharp. He took a final glance at the wristcom, the tool of a disabled being, and a look of genuine scorn twisted his features. He turned on his heel. As he rejoined his waiting officers, he didn't bother to lower his voice. "Come," he said, the word carrying. "Let's leave the relic to his silence. The past has little to teach the future." The group moved away to their own table, their laughter a bit too loud, a performance of their own vitality. At the service station, Sumin's hand was clenched tight around the water pitcher. She had seen it all. She had seen the Admiral's absolute stillness. She had seen the cruel, slow way the young captain spoke. She had read the two words on the screen. She understood the deep, public humiliation. Her heart ached with a sudden, fierce empathy. She knew what it was like to be looked down upon, to be seen as less. But for him, a giant and a hero, it must have been a different kind of cold. Admiral Take turned back to the window. His hand, resting on the table, had curled into a fist so tight the scales pinched together, showing pale lines. The silence around him was no longer peaceful. It was a wall, thick and heavy, built by the words of a fool who could still hear. He unclenched his hand slowly, one finger at a time. He picked up his water glass again. The ice had melted. He drank it anyway, the coldness inside him having nothing to do with the temperature of the water. The Admiral finished the last of his meal. The plate was clean, the food eaten with a quiet efficiency that held no joy. The encounter with Kale had left a bitter taste, worse than any spice. The silence, which he had almost grown used to, now felt like a prison again. He was aware of every pair of eyes in the room that might be glancing his way. He felt the weight of their thoughts. Poor old Dragon. So proud, so broken. He tapped a command on his wristcom. On the other side of the room, June saw a small light blink on his own monitor. The Admiral's table was ready to be cleared. June gave a signal. Sumin saw the alert on the small screen in the service corridor. It was her table. Her chest tightened. After what she had just witnessed, approaching the Admiral felt like walking up to a mountain that had just been struck by lightning. She adjusted the sling, making sure Ji-ho was secure. He was awake now, looking around with wide, curious eyes, chewing absently on the edge of the fabric. "Be still, little one," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "Just be still." She took a clean tray and walked back into the dining room. She moved towards the Admiral's booth, her steps soft. She focused on the table, on the empty plate and the used glass. She did not look at his face. Admiral Take saw her approach. He noted the human female, her careful movements, the infant strapped to her front. He felt a distant flicker of that earlier annoyance. It was an unnecessary complication in an already difficult evening. He looked away, granting her the privacy to do her work without the pressure of his gaze. Sumin reached the table. She gave a small bow, though he wasn't looking. She then leaned in, her arms extending to gather the dish and the glass. She was precise. The porcelain made no sound as she lifted it. The glass was set gently on her tray. As she straightened, her body turned slightly. Ji-ho, at the level of the table, was now facing the Admiral. The baby had been watching the play of light on the polished surface. Now his gaze traveled upward. It moved over the strange, textured fabric of the Admiral's uniform, over the large, clawed hand resting on the table, and up to the face. It was a face unlike any he had ever seen. Hard scales, not soft skin. A long muzzle, not a flat nose. A crest of rigid spines where hair should be. And two eyes, like golden suns, narrow and serious. Ji-ho stopped chewing on the sling. His eyebrows lifted. He stared. Sumin felt him shift and looked down. Her blood went cold. The Admiral, sensing a change, turned his head back. The two looked at each other. The ancient warrior and the newborn child. Take expected many things. Fear which many young beings showed. or blank, simple curiosity. He was prepared for the baby to cry, to create a noise he could not hear but would cause a disturbance everyone else would react to. Jiho did none of these things. His little face, after a moment of intense study, simply relaxed. Then it opened up. His eyes crinkled. His mouth, toothless and pink, spread into a wide, wet, genuine smile. It was a smile of pure, uncomplicated delight. He let out a soft, happy sound, a bubbling ah that was full of warmth. That Sumin flinched. "I am so sorry, Admiral," she whispered, her voice trembling. She quickly put a hand on Jiho's back, turning him away, breaking the stare. He is just a baby. He means no disrespect." She bowed again, deeper this time, her face hot with shame. She began to back away. Admiral Take raised his hand. It was a small motion, just lifting his fingers from the table. But it was a clear command to stop. Sumin froze, her heart pounding. Take was looking at the baby. The annoyance was gone, washed away by something unexpected. That smile. It held no pity. It held no fear. It held no knowledge of battles lost or hearing lost. It was not a smile for a hero or a relic. It was just a smile for a living being sitting nearby. It was a connection offered without any reason at all. He looked at the mother's terrified face. He shook his head once. A slow, deliberate side-to-side motion. It was not a shake of anger. It was a dismissal of her apology. It meant, "It is not a problem." He then gave the smallest, almost imperceptible nod towards her and the child. A gesture of permission, or perhaps just acknowledgement. Sumin understood. The fear in her eyes softened into confusion, then into a glimmer of relief. She managed a shaky nod of her own. "Thank you," she murmured. She did not bow again. She simply turned and walked carefully back towards the service corridor, holding her tray like a shield. Admiral Take watched them go. His eyes lingered on the back of the baby's head. For the first time that night, the silence around him did not feel heavy. Felt simple. The interaction had required no words, no translation, no awkward technology. Just a look, a smile, and a shake of the head. It was the most honest conversation he'd had in a long time. He turned back to the window, but the stars seemed a little less cold. Sumin stood in the quiet service corridor, catching her breath. The cool metal wall felt solid against her back. Her hands were still trembling slightly from the encounter. She looked down at Jiho. He was looking back up at her, his dark eyes bright and content. He seemed entirely pleased with himself. "You strange little boy," she whispered, her voice full of a shaky kind of love. "You smile at a dragon." He gurgled in response, blowing a small spit bubble. Sumin smiled too, the fear finally melting away. The Admiral had not been angry. He had been curious. That was the word. He had looked at Jiho not as a nuisance, but as a puzzle. A small, smiling puzzle. She checked the order screen. The Admiral was finished. His table needed a final check. She would need to go back one more time to see if he wanted anything else, and then present the bill screen. This was the last task. Then her shift would be over, and she could take her sleepy baby home to their small, warm module. She took another deep breath, smoothed her tunic, and walked back into the dining room. The atmosphere had shifted. Captain Kale and his officers were laughing loudly at their table, the sound sharp and jarring in the comm space. Their noise seemed to press against the quiet corners of the room. Sumin moved past them, keeping her eyes forward. She approached the Admiral's booth from the side, stepping carefully into his line of sight. He was not looking at the stars now. He was looking at his own reflection in the dark glass of the window, or perhaps at nothing at all. His face was back to being a still, solemn mask. She waited until his eyes flicked toward her. She then bowed her head slightly and gestured with an open hand towards the empty table, a silent question. "Is there anything more you require?" He understood. He shook his head once. "Nos chinadid." She then held out the small, flat payment screen for him to see. He could tap his credit chip against it. It was a simple, silent transaction. But Jiho had other ideas. He had been lulled by the walk, but now he was awake and alert again. His eyes, from the safety of his mother's sling, found the Admiral once more. The large, scaled figure seemed to fascinate him utterly. He twisted his little body, trying to get a better look. Admiral Take saw the movement. He looked away from the payment screen and down at the baby. There was no smile on the baby's face now, just deep, serious study. The Admiral found himself studying back. The human infant was so soft, so vulnerable, so alive. Jiho's mouth opened. He made a soft, experimental sound. Bah! He breathed out. Then his tiny tongue pressed against the roof of his mouth, and he made a wet, gurgling noise deep in his throat. He was just playing, just testing his voice as babies do. But then something changed. Jiho's face scrunched up with focus. He was looking straight into the Admiral's golden eyes. He took a small, quick breath. His little chest pushed out. From his throat came a new sound. It was not a cry. It was not a laugh. It was a low, rough, vibrating brrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrr and to anyone else in the room who might have been listening, it was just odd baby babble. A funny, gurgly noise. To Admiral Take. The world shifted. He did not hear it. He felt it. The sound was a perfect, accidental imitation of a Draconis subsonic greeting. The first part, the brrrrrrrrum, was the deep, respectful vibration for honored one. The second, the arum, was the warmer, familial rumble for elder. The baby's vocal cords, by pure random chance, had hit the exact low frequency. The sound waves traveled through the air, but more importantly, they traveled through the solid material of the floor and the frame of the booth. They vibrated up through the seat, through the table, and into Take's body. He felt it in his bones, in his spine, in the core of his being. It was a vibration he had not felt in 10 years. It was the ghost of a feeling, the echo of a language he thought was lost to him forever. It was not heard. It was remembered in his very cells. His whole body went rigid. His eyes, which had been calm and dull, widened. The slitted pupils expanded into dark pools of shock. He stared at the baby, who now looked back at him with a pleased expression, as if he had just accomplished a great task. Sumin saw the change. She saw the Admiral's sudden, total stillness, the look of utter shock on his ancient face. Her blood turned to ice. She thought the sound had been offensive, a rude noise. Her mind filled with panic. "Admiral, please," she stammered, stepping back, clutching Jiho. "I am so sorry. He doesn't know. It was just a noise he didn't mean." But Admiral Take was no longer looking at her. He was only looking at Jiho. Slowly, with a hand that trembled just slightly, he reached out. He did not touch the baby. Instead, he placed his broad, clawed palm flat down on the polished surface of the table. He closed his eyes. In the silence of his own mind, Admiral Take focused everything on his hand. He felt the cool, smooth table under his palm. He remembered the vibration. The baby's accidental greeting had been a key. Turning a lock inside him he thought was rusted shut. He concentrated. Deep in his chest, he summoned the old physical memory. It was not about hearing. It was about pressure, about rhythm, about the push of air from his lungs and the controlled tension in his throat muscles. It was a skill learned in the creche. Long before he ever commanded starships, he pushed at a low, deep thrum traveled from his core, up through his body, and down his arm. It was a soft, answering vibration. It moved through the bones of his hand and into the solid table. The water in his glass shimmered with tiny, perfect ripples. The vibration traveled through the floor. To Jiho, pressed against his mother and connected to the same deck. It was a faint, tickling buzz. The baby's eyes went wide. He stopped squirming. He felt the new feeling. It was interesting. It was a game. He let out another bubbly, gurgling sound, trying to copy it. This one was less perfect, a messy mix of baby noise and low rumble. To Take. It was a symphony. He could feel the intent, the curiosity, the happy, playful energy behind the clumsy sound. It was communication, raw, imperfect, and real. He opened his eyes. The shock was gone. replaced by a look of pure, stunned wonder. A soundless rush of air escaped his nostrils, a faint puff of smoke in the cool air, the draconis version of a soft laugh across the room. Captain Kale had been watching. He saw the old admiral place his hand on the table, his eyes closed like he was praying. He saw the human server looking terrified. He saw the baby babbling. He shook his head, a smirk on his face. "The old one has lost his mind," he muttered to his officers. "Now he is playing games with human infants." June, the maitre d', had also noticed the strange scene. Concerned about a disturbance, he began to glide towards the booth. Sumin saw him coming and felt a new wave of dread. She was sure they were about to be thrown out or worse. Admiral Take saw June approaching. The moment was fragile, a tiny bubble of connection in his silent world. He would not let it be popped by protocol. With his right hand still flat on the table, feeling the echo of the baby's vibrations, he used his left. He tapped his wrist comm with swift, sure movements that he pulled up a blank message. He typed a single line of text. He made the font large and bright. As June arrived, his professional smile fixed in place. Take turned the screen. He showed it first to June, then to Sumin, and finally, he held it up so Captain Kale's table could see it clearly. The words glowed in the dim light. "This child speaks a forgotten tongue." June stopped. His polite smile faded into genuine confusion. He read the words again. He looked at the baby, who was now chewing on his own fist, and then back at the Admiral's serious, wonder-filled face. That Sumin could not read the Imperial script. She looked from the screen to June's face, searching for a clue. What does it say?" she whispered. Before June could translate, Admiral Take was typing again. His claws moved with a speed and purpose they had not shown all night. He wrote a second message. He showed it to June. "The server and her progeny will join me. Their bill is mine. Permanently." June's beak opened slightly. This was unprecedented. He gave a slow, deep bow. "Of course, Admiral. At once." Take was not finished. He closed that message and opened a private channel. He sent a command to his personal aide, waiting on his shuttle. The message was direct. "Begin drafting a proposal. The Imperial Academy is to establish a new research division in cross-species vibrational communication. Primary consultants: 1 Admiral Take, Ret, and 1 human child, JIHO. He sent it. Then, finally, he looked back at Sumin. Her face was pale with confusion. He pointed to the empty seat across from him in the booth. He then pointed to her and to Jiho. He made a gentle, welcoming motion with his hand. Sumin stood frozen. June gently touched her elbow. "It is all right," he said softly, his voice filled with a new respect. "He is inviting you to sit. He is paying for your meal. For all of them." She didn't understand why. None of it made sense. But the Admiral's eyes were not angry or proud. They were bright, like stars coming out from behind a cloud. They were kind. Hesitantly, she stepped forward. She slid into the booth across from the giant dragon warrior, holding Jiho close. She sat on the edge of the seat, back straight. Admiral Take looked at the baby. He slowly, carefully extended one clawed finger across the table. Not to poke, but to offer. A point of contact. Jiho, fascinated by the shiny, hard claw, reached out his own tiny, soft hand. His fingers wrapped around the very tip. Take closed his eyes again. Through that tiny point of contact, he felt the warm, living pulse of the child. And for the first time in a decade, he did not feel alone. Sumin sat very still. The booth seat was soft, but she felt like she was sitting on stone. The Dragon Admiral was looking at her baby, who was now holding the tip of a giant, dangerous-looking claw with complete trust. The Admiral's eyes were closed, as if he was listening to a very quiet song. She did not understand what was happening. The words on the screen, "a forgotten tongue," swirled in her mind. Jiho just made baby noises. How could that mean anything to this great warrior? Captain Kale watched from his table, his earlier smirk gone. He saw the human sitting in the Admiral's booth. He saw the look of deep focus on Take's face. It wasn't the look of a broken old fool. It was the look of an admiral discovering a new star system. It unsettled Kale. He looked away, a sour feeling in his stomach. June returned. He brought a small, sweet fruit juice for Sumin and a bowl of warm milk, placing them quietly on the table. He gave her an encouraging, if still confused, nod before retreating. Admiral Take opened his eyes. He released his claw from Jiho's gentle grip. The baby made a soft sound of protest, reaching for the shiny thing again. Take's mouth did not smile, but the skin around his eyes softened. He picked up his wristcom. He typed slowly, making sure Sumin could follow the words as they appeared. "Your son," the screen said. He made a sound, a true sound, not to ears, to bones, to hear. Take tapped his own broad chest with his free hand. Sumin read the words. She looked down at Jiho, who was now trying to grab the spoon beside the milk bowl. "A true sound?" she asked aloud, forgetting herself. Take nodded. He typed again. "My people speak this way, under words. I have not felt it since I was injured." He found it, by accident. The wonder in the words was clear. Sumin began to understand, just a little. It wasn't about the noise everyone else could hear. It was about a feeling, a vibration. She thought of how Jiho would sometimes put his hand on her throat when she hummed. Feeling the buzz, a shaky hope began to bloom in her chest. He reached you?" she whispered. Take gave a single, firm nod. He did. He then typed something else. His movements were slower, more thoughtful. "You will not pay for food here again. This is my order. You will also come to the academy with me. You and the child. We have work to do." Sumin's eyes filled with tears. She blinked them back fast. This was not pity. This was not charity. The Admiral's face was serious, professional. He was offering her a job. He was offering her son a purpose. In a station where humans swept floors and carried boxes, he was saying they had something valuable. Something only they could do. "What kind of work?" she asked, her voice thick. Take typed the final message of the evening. "We will teach the silence how to speak." He put the wristcom down. He gestured to the bowl of milk. Sumin understood. She dipped the spoon, blew on it gently, and offered it to Jiho. He drank it messily, his eyes still on the Admiral. Take watched them. He did not see a poor human server anymore. He saw a mother, strong and careful. He saw a key, small and smiling, that had unlocked a door he thought was sealed forever. Across the room, Captain Kale and his officers stood to leave. Kale cast one last look at the booth. He saw the three of them together. The old warrior, the young mother, and the child. It looked like a picture. Family. A strange, new kind of family. He felt a sudden, sharp understanding that he had misjudged everything. He turned and walked out. His laughter gone for good. Sumin fed Jiho until he was full and sleepy. The Admiral just sat, watching the stars, feeling the gentle, living vibrations of the child across from him. It was not sound. It was better. It was connection. When Jiho was asleep, his head against her chest, Sumin looked up. "Thank you, Admiral," she said. She meant it for the food, for the job, for the respect. He understood. He shook his head. "No." Then he pointed a claw at Jiho, and then at his own heart. "Thank you." June came with the final bill. Take paid with a tap of his wrist. As they all stood to leave, Take gestured for Sumin to walk with him. They moved through the dining room together, past the curious glances. The Admiral walked tall, his isolation a thing of the past. At the entrance to the shuttle bay, he stopped. He typed one last message to her. "Tomorrow, 0900. These coordinates. Bring him. We will be there," Sumin promised. Admiral Take looked at the sleeping baby one more time. He gave a slow, deep nod, a bow of the head from an elder to a worthy, if tiny, ally. Then he turned and walked towards his shuttle, his steps firm. The silence around him was no longer an empty space. It was a canvas, and for the first time in 10 years he had found the paint.